The hum of the spaceship's engines was all that filled the air as the human soldier Mark stood on the alien planet's surface. He had never imagined he would end up here, stranded on a foreign world, far from Earth. The mission had gone terribly wrong, and now Mark was alone. The last message from command had been a garbled transmission, leaving him with only a vague idea of what had happened to the rest of his crew. With no other option, Mark set out to explore the planet, hoping to find some sign of civilization. The landscape was unlike anything he had seen before: glowing trees, vibrant skies, and strange, towering structures in the distance. It was beautiful in a way that made him feel small, like a tiny speck in the vastness of the universe. After walking for hours, Mark found himself in front of a grand palace. It looked ancient, with tall spires reaching for the sky and intricate designs covering every surface. It was like nothing from Earth, and yet something about it seemed inviting. Driven by curiosity, Mark walked through the palace's massive archway. Inside, he was greeted by a breathtaking sight. The palace was more magnificent than anything he could have imagined. Marble floors stretched out before him, and alien tapestries decorated the walls, telling stories of a civilization that spanned across the stars. It was a place of power, yet there was an eerie silence, as if the palace itself was holding its breath. As Mark explored further, a figure appeared before him, stepping from the shadows. She was tall, her skin shimmering with a pale, silvery blue hue. Her eyes, large and radiant, held a depth that seemed to see right through him. Her presence was commanding, but there was a gentleness to her that made him feel oddly at ease. She wore a gown made from a fabric that looked like liquid light, flowing effortlessly around her. "I am Princess Arana," she said, her voice smooth and melodic, like a song carried on the wind. "Welcome to my home." Mark froze for a moment, unsure of what to say. This was no ordinary encounter. She was an alien, and yet she had an aura of grace that left him speechless. Her gaze lingered on him, studying him, as if trying to understand what he was. Mark could feel his heart racing, unsure if he was in danger or in the presence of something extraordinary. "Do not be afraid," the princess continued, her lips curling into a slight smile. "I've been waiting for you." Mark didn't understand what she meant, but something in the way she said it made him feel as though he had just stepped into a much bigger story. He nodded slowly, trying to keep his composure. The princess, however, seemed to sense his unease. "You look lost, human," she said, stepping closer. "Perhaps I can help." Mark stood there, unsure of what to say. Princess Arana's words echoed in his mind, and yet all he could do was stare at her. She was so different from anything he had ever encountered. Her beauty was mesmerizing, but it wasn't just her looks. There was something about her presence that made him feel small, but also strangely comforted. "Do not be afraid," she repeated, her voice calm and soothing. "I mean you no harm. I simply wish to understand you better." Mark finally spoke, his voice shaky. I don't know what I'm doing here. My ship crashed. I'm lost." "I know," the princess replied, her gaze never leaving him. "I've been watching. You are not the first human to visit my world." Mark blinked, surprised by her words. "You've been watching me? But how?" The princess smiled, though it was a sad smile, as if she carried a weight that no one else could understand. "My people have ways of observing the stars. We knew you were coming." He felt his heart race again. This was no ordinary alien civilization. This was something advanced beyond anything he had ever imagined. It wasn't just that she was beautiful and regal. She was someone who knew things about him, things about Earth, things he hadn't even realized about himself. "You must be tired," she said, breaking his thoughts. "Come, I will show you my home. You are safe here." Before Mark could say anything, she turned and gestured for him to follow. He hesitated for a moment, then did as she asked. As they walked through the palace, the beauty of the place overwhelmed him. The walls were covered in strange patterns, and large windows gave breathtaking views of the alien landscape. The air smelled fresh, yet foreign, like flowers he had never smelled before, mixed with something metallic. Princess Arana led him to a grand dining hall, where the scent of food filled the air. Mark's stomach growled loudly, and he felt embarrassed, but she just chuckled softly. "I assume you haven't eaten in a while," she said, a touch of amusement in her voice. "Please, sit." Mark sat at the long, elegant table, feeling out of place among the fine alien dishes. Arana sat opposite him, watching him closely as he hesitated, unsure of how to start the conversation. But she didn't seem to mind his silence. Instead, she began speaking about her world and her people. "We are called the Lyrians," she said, her voice soft yet strong. "We have watched the galaxy for centuries, but we have kept to ourselves. My people fear the unknown, but I—" She paused, her expression becoming distant. "I long to understand it." Mark listened carefully, feeling like he was hearing something deeply personal. Arana's eyes, once cold and distant, now seemed to soften, and he could see the vulnerability hidden beneath her royal exterior. "Do you ever feel alone?" she asked suddenly, her voice quieter now. Mark looked at her, unsure of how to respond. He thought about his own life, his time in space, his loneliness as he floated through the stars. He nodded slowly. "Yes," he said quietly, meeting her gaze. "I think everyone does, sometimes." Princess Arana studied him for a moment, and then, as if testing the waters, she asked softly, "Would you like to stay here for a while, human?" Mark spent the following days in the palace, unsure of what to make of everything. He ate meals with Princess Arana, explored her world, and even helped her with small tasks. Though she never forced him to stay, her quiet insistence made it hard for him to leave. He felt an odd sense of peace around her, even though his mind was still full of questions. One evening, as the twin moons of the alien planet rose high in the sky, the princess invited him to a quiet garden behind the palace. The air was cool and smelled sweet, like lavender and something more exotic. The garden was lush, with strange flowers glowing in the night, casting an ethereal light on the path ahead. Mark followed Arana in silence, his thoughts heavy. He had come to admire her more than he could put into words. She was strong, yet gentle, regal, yet warm. But there was something about her, something hidden beneath the surface that seemed almost lonely. They reached a stone bench overlooking a quiet pond, its surface shimmering with reflections of the moons above. Arana sat down gracefully and patted the space beside her. Mark hesitated before joining her, unsure of what she was going to say next. "I've been wondering," she began, her voice quieter than usual, "what it must be like on Earth. To be part of a world that is constantly moving, changing, full of people. I sometimes envy that." Mark looked at her, confused. "But you're a princess. You have everything you could want." Arana shook her head slowly, her long silver-blue hair flowing gently with the breeze. "I have power, yes. I have wealth, and my people respect me. But what I do not have, Mark, is freedom. Freedom to live my life as I choose. I am always expected to lead, to make decisions that will affect billions of lives. I cannot escape that. I cannot escape my loneliness." Her words hung in the air, and Mark could see the weight of her responsibilities on her shoulders. She had spoken with such honesty that it left him speechless. He didn't know what to say. What could he say? He was just a soldier, lost, confused, and out of place on this alien world. But as he looked at her, he realized that they had more in common than he had thought. She was powerful, but she was also trapped, just as he felt trapped in his own life. I never thought about it that way," Mark said quietly. "You seem so in control, so sure of everything." Arana smiled softly, her eyes reflecting a sadness Mark couldn't fully understand. "It's easy to appear in control when you have no choice but to be." They sat together in silence for a long time, watching the stars above. Mark felt a sense of connection with her, as if they were both trying to find a way out of their own worlds. Finally, Arana spoke again. "Tell me, Mark, do you ever feel like you're being watched? Like someone is waiting for you to make a choice you don't want to make?" Mark looked at her, his heart pounding. He hadn't expected such a deep question, but it made him wonder if he wasn't the only one facing tough choices. "Every day," he whispered, his voice barely audible. Every day. The days passed slowly in the palace, and Mark found himself spending more time with Princess Arana. The more he got to know her, the more his feelings grew. He had always admired her strength and grace, but it was her vulnerability, hidden behind her royal facade, that tugged at his heart. She was nothing like the cold, distant leaders he had heard about in stories. She was human in the ways that mattered. She was kind, thoughtful, and above all, real. One evening after dinner, Mark and Arana found themselves walking along the palace's outer walls. The sky was clear, and the stars shone brightly above them. The night air was warm, and the gentle breeze carried the scent of the strange flowers that grew throughout the garden. Mark didn't know how it had happened. One moment, they were walking in comfortable silence, and the next, he found himself staring at her, feeling an urge to say something, to tell her how he felt. But the words seemed impossible to speak. Arana turned to him, her glowing eyes searching his face. "What is it, Mark?" she asked, her voice soft but curious. "You've been quiet lately." Mark felt a wave of panic wash over him. He had never been good with his emotions, especially not with someone like her, someone so important, so powerful. How could he say what he was feeling? He opened his mouth, but no words came out. The princess took a step closer, her presence commanding but gentle. "You don't have to hide anything from me, Mark," she said. "I can see it in your eyes. Something is different." Mark swallowed hard. He had known this moment was coming, but now that it was here, he didn't know if he could go through with it. What if she didn't feel the same way? What if he said the wrong thing and ruined everything? I don't know how to say this," he started, his voice shaky. "But I think I'm starting to care about you, more than I should." The words hung in the air, and for a moment, Mark thought he might have made a terrible mistake. He wanted to look away, to change the subject, but Arana's gaze held him in place. She didn't look shocked or disappointed. She looked thoughtful, as if she was considering his words carefully. "I'm not sure what I expected you to say," Arana replied, her voice quiet. "But I do know one thing." Mark's heart skipped a beat. "What's that?" "You're not the first human to feel this way," she said, her eyes never leaving his. "But you might be the first one to admit it." Mark's confusion deepened. "What do you mean?" The princess smiled softly. "I have spent years with many people around me, all of them looking to me for guidance, for strength. But no one has ever dared to show me their true feelings. They always hide behind their masks. But you are different, Mark." Mark was stunned. He had thought he was the one being vulnerable, the one opening up. But now he saw the depth of her own hidden emotions. For the first time, he realized just how lonely she must have felt. "You're not afraid?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. Arana shook her head. "I don't think I've ever been more afraid of anything in my life." Mark couldn't stop thinking about what had happened in the garden. The way Arana had looked at him, there was something in her eyes that made him feel both seen and vulnerable. He had confessed his feelings to her, something he hadn't done in years. But instead of the rejection he feared, she had understood. And that only made things more complicated. For the next few days, Mark found it harder to focus on anything. Every time he looked at Arana, his heart raced. She wasn't just the powerful princess of a strange, beautiful world. She had become someone he cared about deeply. He wasn't sure how it had happened. He had never expected to form any kind of bond with her. But now, the thought of leaving this planet, of returning to his mission and his life as a soldier, felt like an impossible choice. Arana, on the other hand, seemed more at ease. She still carried herself with the grace and confidence of a ruler, but there was a softness in her demeanor that hadn't been there before. She spoke to Mark more freely, as though she had finally found someone who wasn't just there to admire her position or power. Yet, as close as they were becoming, Mark couldn't shake the feeling that their connection might not be enough. He was just a human, one person out of billions. And she, the princess, had a responsibility to her people, to her world. Could they ever truly be together? Could a soldier like him stand by her side, or would he just be another fleeting moment in the grand story of her life? One evening, after another quiet dinner, Arana took Mark out to the palace's balcony. The view from here was breathtaking. The twin moons hung low in the sky, casting a soft glow over the landscape below. The stars sparkled, endless and far away, a reminder of how small they both were in the vastness of the universe. Mark leaned against the balcony railing, staring out into the distance. He wanted to say something to her, wanted to open up more, to tell her everything he was feeling. But the words stuck in his throat. What if he said the wrong thing? What if he told her he loved her, only to find out that she couldn't love him back in the way he wanted? "You're quiet tonight," Arana said, her voice soft. She stepped beside him, her eyes following his gaze to the horizon. "I'm just thinking," Mark replied, his voice barely above a whisper. "About everything. About us." Arana didn't say anything at first, but her hand brushed against his. Mark tensed, unsure of what to do. She could feel it too, the tension between them. But unlike him, she seemed ready to face it. "You're afraid," she said, her voice steady. Mark turned to face her, his eyes wide. "I don't know what to do, Arana. I'm scared of what this means. I'm not even sure I belong here. I'm just a soldier from Earth. You're a princess. What happens when I have to leave?" Arana's expression softened, and she stepped closer. "You're not just a soldier, Mark, and I'm not just a princess. We are both more than what we appear to be. And no matter what happens, we are not just a fleeting moment. We are something real." Mark didn't know how to respond to that. But looking into her eyes, he felt something shift inside him. Maybe, just maybe, they had a chance. The days in the palace had grown warmer, both literally and emotionally. Mark and Arana spent more time together, walking the gardens, talking about everything and nothing. Every moment felt like it brought them closer, and yet, Mark couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to change. Arana seemed to sense his unease. She had always been perceptive, and lately her gaze had grown more intense whenever she looked at him. Mark found it hard to ignore. Sometimes, he caught her watching him with a look in her eyes that made him feel exposed, as if she could see all of his hidden thoughts. One afternoon, while they were sitting in a quiet corner of the palace, Arana spoke up. "You're afraid," she said, her voice soft but firm. Mark looked up, startled by her directness. "What do you mean?" "You hide it well, but I can see it. You're afraid of me," she continued, her eyes narrowing slightly. "Afraid of what we are becoming." Mark's heart skipped a beat. He had been trying so hard to keep his feelings under control, to stay focused on the reality of their situation. But now, with her words hanging in the air, it felt like the walls he had built around himself were starting to crumble. "I'm not afraid of you," he said quickly, his voice betraying his nervousness. I don't know what I'm doing here. I don't know what you expect from me." Arana tilted her head, studying him intently. "You think I expect something from you. You think this is some kind of game." Mark swallowed hard. "Isn't it?" He couldn't help the bitterness in his voice. "You're a princess, Arana. I'm just a soldier. I don't belong here. I don't belong with you." The princess's expression softened, and she took a step closer. "You belong here more than you think, Mark. This isn't a game to me. It's not just about duty or politics. It's about something real." Mark stared at her, his mind racing. She was right. In a way, this wasn't a game. It wasn't something he could easily walk away from. But the truth was, he didn't know how to play this game, let alone win it. And the longer he stayed here, the more complicated everything became. He ran a hand through his hair, frustration building inside him. But how can it be real? How can we be real when everything is against us? You have your people, your world, your duties, and I'm just some guy who crashed here by accident. What if I'm just a distraction? Arana's eyes softened with understanding. She placed a gentle hand on his arm, and Mark couldn't help but feel the warmth of her touch. Mark, we can't control everything. We can't control where we come from or where we're going, but we can control what we do with the time we have. And right now, I want to be with you. I want to see where we can go. Mark looked into her eyes, searching for the truth in her words. Could he really believe her? Could he trust that this wasn't just some fleeting moment, that it could be something more? I don't know, he admitted softly. But maybe we can try. Arana smiled, a genuine, beautiful smile that reached her eyes. That's all I'm asking, Mark. Just a chance. The days blurred together in the palace, and Mark found himself caught in a whirlwind of emotions. Every moment with Arana felt like a step closer to something that could change his life forever. But the closer he got to her, the more unsure he became. He was starting to care for her in ways he hadn't expected, and yet he still couldn't shake the feeling that they were too different. He was a soldier from a distant planet, and she was the princess of an entire civilization. Could love really bridge that gap? One evening, as they stood together in the garden, Mark couldn't help but feel the weight of the unspoken words between them. Arana was quiet today, her usual calm replaced by a deeper, almost unrecognizable stillness. She gazed out at the stars, her eyes soft but distant, and Mark knew she was thinking about something important. "You've been quiet lately," he said, breaking the silence. "What's on your mind?" Arana turned to face him, her eyes meeting his. "I've been thinking about what you said," she replied, her voice steady, but filled with a hint of uncertainty. Mark felt his heart race. He had confessed his feelings to her not long ago, and ever since then, things had felt both closer and more distant at the same time. He wanted to tell her everything that was on his mind, to share his fear, his doubts, his hopes, but he didn't know where to start. "What do you mean?" he asked, his voice low. "The way you said you didn't belong here, that you were just a soldier." "I'm afraid you're right," Arana said, taking a small step closer. "I've been asking myself if this, what we have, could ever work. You're from Earth, Mark. You have a life there, and I have responsibilities here. I can't just throw everything away, and I don't want to drag you into a life you don't belong in." Mark listened carefully, feeling a knot form in his chest. He understood her fears. He shared them. The idea of leaving this place, leaving her, was painful. But staying, living a life he wasn't sure he could belong to, was just as frightening. "I don't know if I belong here either," he said quietly. "But I know that being with you feels real, Arana. I've never felt like this before. And I don't know if I'm ready to let go of that just yet." Arana's eyes softened, and she took another step toward him, closing the distance between them. "Mark, I need you to understand something," she said, her voice now a whisper. "This isn't easy for me. I've never let anyone get close, never let anyone see who I really am. I've spent my life as a ruler, and I've never had the chance to just be me. But with you, I feel like I can. I feel like I can just be Arana." Mark's heart swelled at her words, and for the first time, he'd felt a sense of hope. She was opening up to him, allowing him to see the real her. And that felt like a gift, something he didn't want to take for granted. "You don't have to choose between your world and me," Mark said, his voice steady. "I'm not asking you to change everything for me. I just want a chance to figure this out with you." Arana looked at him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then, slowly, she nodded. "Then let's figure it out together, Mark. But know this, whatever happens, I can't go back to being the person I was before you came into my life." Mark smiled, feeling a sense of peace settle over him. For the first time, he felt like he was ready to face whatever came next. No matter how uncertain the future was, he would face it with Arana by his side. Mark spent the following days in a quiet turmoil. The weight of his feelings for Arana grew heavier with each passing moment, and though he tried to focus on other things, she was always in his thoughts. They had come so far already, but still, there was something he hadn't told her. Something that felt too big, too important to ignore any longer. Arana, on the other hand, seemed calmer. She had opened up to him in ways she never had with anyone else, and though her responsibilities as a princess still loomed over her, she now allowed herself to share small, intimate moments with him. They would sit together in the evenings, talking about their worlds, their hopes, and even their fears. It was these moments that made Mark feel as though the impossible might actually be within reach. Yet there was still a question Mark needed to answer for himself. He knew that Arana was giving him a chance, one she hadn't given anyone else. But was he ready to give everything in return? Was he ready to put aside his doubts and fully open himself to a future with her? One evening, as they stood on the balcony, the sky above them bathed in the soft glow of twin moons, Mark turned to Arana, his heart pounding in his chest. "Arana," he began, his voice shaky. "There's something I need to tell you, something I've been thinking about for a long time now." She turned to face him, her eyes gentle, but there was a spark of curiosity in them as well. "What is it, Mark?" He took a deep breath, steadying himself. He had to say it. He had to stop holding back. I love you," he said, his words coming out in a rush. "I didn't know it at first, but now I can't deny it. I've fallen for you. Not just because of who you are as a princess, or because of everything you've done for your people. I love you for you, the person you are when you're not leading, when you're just Arana." Her expression softened, and Mark could see the warmth in her eyes. He had said it. He had finally said the words that had been trapped inside him for so long. But as the seconds passed, he started to feel anxious. What if she didn't feel the same way? What if this was too much, too soon? But then, slowly, Arana smiled, and Mark's heart skipped a beat. "I didn't expect you to say that," she replied quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. "But I'm glad you did." Mark blinked, confused. "What do you mean?" Arana's smile widened, and she took a step closer to him. "I didn't think I was ready for this," she said softly. "For someone to love me, for someone to see me as I truly am. But Mark, I feel it too. I love you. I love the way you see me, the way you care about me, the way you're willing to be vulnerable with me. I never thought I'd find someone who could truly understand me like you do." Mark's breath caught in his chest. "You love me?" he asked, almost in disbelief. Arana nodded. "Yes, Mark, I do." For a moment, they both stood there, the words hanging in the air between them, but neither of them needed to say anything more. The silence was filled with the weight of their shared emotions, and in that moment, Mark knew that whatever happened next, they would face it together. The impossible had become possible, and love had found its way between two worlds. The days after their confession were filled with a strange sense of peace. Mark had expected things to feel more complicated, to feel like there was a weight now that they had admitted their feelings for each other. But instead, there was only a lightness in the air, as if the universe had shifted in their favor. They spent their days as they always had, talking, walking the palace grounds, sharing meals. But now, everything felt different. There was an understanding between them, an unspoken connection that made every moment seem more significant. Mark couldn't stop smiling when he was with Arana. Her presence was like a warm light that kept the darkness of doubt at bay. But as much as Mark felt the growing closeness between them, there was still the reality of their situation to face. They had feelings for each other, yes, but the world around them wasn't going to change just because they had admitted their love. Arana was still a princess, with responsibilities that tied her to her people. Mark was still a soldier, stranded on a foreign planet with no clear way of returning home. Their worlds were so different, and the future seemed uncertain. One afternoon, as they sat in the quiet of the palace garden, Arana turned to Mark with a serious look on her face. He had learned to recognize when she was deep in thought, and today was no different. "Mark," she said softly, "I know we've been avoiding the hard questions, but I think it's time we faced them. Our worlds are different, and no matter how much I want this, I don't know how we can make this work." Mark felt a pang of uncertainty in his chest. He had been hoping to avoid this conversation, not because he wasn't ready for it, but because he was scared of the answer. What if they couldn't find a way to be together? What if their love was just a fleeting dream? "I know," he said quietly, his voice heavy. "I've been thinking about it too. You have your kingdom, your people, and I'm just a soldier with no way of going back to Earth. I don't want to hold you back, Arana. I don't want you to choose me over everything else." Arana shook her head, her expression soft but determined. "I'm not choosing between you and my people, Mark. I would never do that. But I also can't keep pretending that what we have, doesn't matter. It matters to me, and I want to find a way to make it work, even if it means making difficult choices." Mark looked into her eyes, feeling the depth of her words. For the first time, he saw the full extent of her inner strength, the way she was willing to fight for what she believed in, even if it meant challenging everything she had known. "What do we do now?" Mark asked, his voice full of hope. "How do we move forward?" Arana smiled, the kind of smile that made Mark's heart race. "We take it one step at a time. We face the challenges together, and we figure it out, no matter how hard it is. We don't know what the future holds, but I know that I want you in it. And that's a good place to start." Mark smiled back, feeling the weight lift off his shoulders. Whatever the future held, they would face it together. And for the first time since he had crash-landed on this strange world, he felt like he was exactly where he was meant to be. The weeks that followed their conversation were filled with change. Mark and Arana knew that they had no easy path ahead of them. The future was uncertain, and they were both aware of the difficulties they would face. But for the first time, they had something that felt real, something worth fighting for. Arana had begun to share more of her responsibilities with Mark. She trusted him in ways she hadn't trusted anyone else. And as they spent more time together, Mark saw the true strength of her leadership. She wasn't just a princess because of her birthright. She was a leader because she cared deeply about her people. She made decisions with compassion, always weighing the consequences carefully. Mark admired that about her, but it also made him feel more certain that they couldn't just ignore the realities of their situation. One evening, after a long day spent discussing matters of the kingdom, Arana took Mark out to a quiet spot in the palace gardens. The moon hung low in the sky, casting a soft glow over the flowers that bloomed in the night. The air was cool, and the sounds of the night filled the space around them. Mark had noticed how often they found themselves returning to this garden, a place where they could be alone and free of the weight of their roles. It was their space, where the rest of the world seemed far away. "I've been thinking," Arana said, breaking the silence. She looked at Mark, her eyes filled with determination. "I can't ask you to stay here forever, Mark. You belong to Earth. I can't take that away from you." Mark looked at her, his heart heavy with the truth of her words. He knew she was right. His life was on Earth, and his time on this alien world couldn't last forever. But at the same time, he didn't want to leave her. The idea of saying goodbye felt unbearable. "But I don't want to leave you either," he said, his voice low. "I want to find a way to make this work, to make us work." Arana reached out and took his hand, her touch warm and comforting. "I don't know what the future holds, but I know one thing, Mark. I don't want to live my life wondering what might have been. I want to build a future with you, even if it's hard, even if we're from different worlds. I want to try." Mark felt a sense of peace wash over him. They couldn't control everything. They couldn't change the fact that they came from different worlds. But they could control how they faced the future, together. "I want that too," he replied, squeezing her hand gently. "We'll figure it out, Arana, one step at a time. And with that, they knew they had made their choice. The future was uncertain, but they would face it together, no matter the challenges. They would build a life, a future, that was theirs. As they stood there, side by side, looking out at the peaceful night, Mark realized that he wasn't alone anymore. He had someone by his side who understood him, who saw him for who he truly was. And that was enough. For now, and for whatever came next.